And welcome into Gator Bytes on the 1010XL.com podcast network, also being simulcast on the Florida Gator 1010XL Facebook page. Today's Gator podcast is brought to you by Southeast Orthopedic Specialist. They're Northeast Florida's leading orthopedic center, providing an unparalleled level of care across numerous locations in both Jacksonville and St. Augustine. That includes Riverside, Northside, the South Side, the beaches, Fleming Island, and St. John's. And we also want to thank the good folks at George Moore Chevrolet for bringing you this week's edition of Gator Bytes. You're looking for an automobile in the area, there's not a better place to go to than George Moore Chevrolet. They've been around forever, and we appreciate their continued support.
It's Christmas time, man.
Of the Gator Bytes podcast. There's no question about that. He is not Denny Thompson. He is Graham Marsh. I'm the hacker, Ryan Green. By the way, I heard you filled in for me 2 weeks ago. Your intro was spot on.
Oh, yeah.
That was good stuff. I was watching that from a Disney hotel room, and I got a kick out of that. That was solid.
I've been producing this podcast for a good while now, and for those of you that listen are probably well aware now that Hack has the same routine to say for Southeast every time.
And the same paper.
For
literally about 5 years now.
I might have been in high school when that paper was printed out.
You probably were, actually. I don't doubt that in the slightest. All right, there's a lot to get into. Signing day, at least the December signing day, has come and gone. Certainly some negative, some positive. Overall, I think people were pretty underwhelmed by it, Graham. The one thing I'll say, it was not a catastrophe. A catastrophe would have been DJ Lagway not signing. Anything after that might be unfortunate, but it was not a catastrophe. The fact that they got a signature from the best quarterback recruit they've signed in over a decade made it, to me, an okay day.
And the fact, I think timing mattered a little bit too. Most of the flips away from Florida's class happened before A, DJ Lagway signed, and B, LJ McCrae signed. So
yeah.
And it was, those flips were obviously negative, and most people were underwhelmed, like you said, as they probably should be. But I do think it was helpful for Billy Napier from an image perspective that those two things happened afterwards.
One of the things about recruiting, all right, and I covered this world for about 4 years with Gridiron Now. I still do it, with the Gators, not as much, but I was inside this world for about 4 years, pretty much every day. Florida knew those flips were coming.
Yes, correct.
I knew Amarius Williams was going to Auburn, and I knew Adarius Hayes was going to Miami a week before signing day. What happens in the world of recruiting is both Miami and Auburn want to get as much bang for their buck as possible. So Auburn will literally tell Amarius Williams, do not flip until signing day, so we can get the biggest reaction that things are going great over here and it hurts Florida. Miami will tell Hayes, do not flip until signing day for the same reason. Look, I'm not going to say who it was. It could have been one of those guys. It could have been somebody else that flipped. Florida had a scheduled in-home visit with somebody that flipped on signing day a week and a half ago. From what I was told, they were basically en route to their house when they found out that that player was gone and visiting the school they ultimately signed with. That player knew they had an in-home visit with Florida. They didn't care. They went and visited the other school. Didn't give Florida the decency to know that before, they were on their way to visit them. Do you want somebody like that in your program? I don't know, but that's the negative side of recruiting that a lot of fans that aren't in this world really don't get to see.
And by the way, a similar thing happened with Florida State, and that type of thing happens a lot.
Oh, KJ Bolden. Yeah.
So like, if you're listening to that and you're like, oh my God, that's crazy. Like that's not that insane of a thing that's happened to other schools before.
Bolden went publicly saying he knew he was going to commit to Georgia 3 weeks before signing day. He was in Tallahassee last weekend telling Florida State media, I'm legit, I'm good. I mean, it can be a dirty world sometimes.
That's a very nice way of putting it.
It's a podcast way of putting it. Perhaps if we were not on a terrestrial I guess technically, I can let it fly on here, right? I probably won't, but technically I could.
It's more about the it's more about upholding the 1010XL image.
Exactly.
Than it is the FCC.
Yes, which is a great image, by the way.
But I think everybody kind of gets the point we're getting at. You know, like look with at least he flipped before signing day, but with Xavier Filsame, when he flipped, like, how many times did he say, "I'm locked into the Gators, I'm not going anywhere"? And then what did he ultimately do? He flipped and went elsewhere.
Well, he was mad that Corey Raymond got fired.
I agree. But post Corey Raymond firing, he doubled down on his commitment to Florida multiple times just to still ultimately leave.
Yeah.
And look, the point is, he won't be the first. He wasn't the first. He won't be the last. The overall point here is don't trust high schoolers until they sign.
Right. And the overall point, too, is that Florida was not caught off guard by these flips. Auburn and Miami want you to believe that. They were not. And Billy Napier basically alluded to that. If I knew about it a week beforehand, how in advance did Florida know that Williams and Hayes were going to flip? All right. More on that later on. The big story was DJ Lagway. I actually had DJ Lagway on Hacker After Dark Wednesday. It was crazy how it happened. So Lagway's on ESPN2 before he signs at 4:30 Eastern. He leaves the ESPN2 set. Him and his high school coach, Trent Miller, call me to record with me, and then he goes onto the stage to announce. And I really appreciate Trent Miller and everybody out at Willis High School. They were fantastic to us here on 1010XL for getting us DJ Lagway. Graham, where can Gator fans hear that if they've missed it?
They can hear it on YouTube. It's on YouTube.
Okay, the 1010XL
YouTube channel.
All they have to search is Hacker After Dark.
All you have to search is 1010XL video.
Okay, search 1010XL video. There's 12-minute interview, about 7 minutes of which were with DJ Lagway. The other 5 were with Trent Miller, Lagway's high school football coach. If you haven't seen that video yet, 1010XL video on YouTube, it's right there. Gator fans, I think you will certainly enjoy it.
And if you want to make it even easier on yourself, you just type in 1010XL DJ Lagway. It'll be the first video.
Perfect. 1010XL DJ Lagway. I have talked to DJ Lagway 3 times during this process now. Every time I talk to that young man, I'm more impressed.
Yeah.
And I don't know what that means as far as if he's going to be an All-American or save the Gator program or whatever verbiage you want to use. But Gator fans, I will tell you this. I've talked to a lot of high school kids over the years. DJ Lagway is an impressive young man.
Yeah, it's a little bit of the Trevor Lawrence effect in terms of, like, he's just so beyond his years in terms of maturity and he's got the personality to play quarterback, which is obviously a plus. And then it's, you know, because I listen to your interview as well, and I've listened to other DJ Lagway interviews before, and I feel the same way, that I always come away impressed. And part of that, I do think, and this is a good thing for the Gators, in my opinion, DJ Lagway has been such a highly sought-after recruit for some time now that it isn't like this is the first time he's had media talking to him. He's done interviews. Like, he's seasoned at this point.
It's been years.
Right, exactly. So he has such a good sense of what he should say, what he shouldn't say, how to say certain things, how to carry on a good conversation in the media. And you're right, with a lot of high school kids, that's not the case yet, simply because the experience just isn't there. With DJ Lagway, I think, because let's call a spade a spade, he's the crown jewel of Billy Napier's recruiting up to this point at Florida. And
potentially he holds Billy Napier's future in its hands.
Correct, yes. Because he's an embodiment of hope for a Billy Napier-led program that without him, I'm not sure exists at all. So that's a huge weight for an, I guess, 17 or 18-year-old to hold on their shoulders. And by the time he's actually playing for Florida, it'll probably be a year from now, because you imagine Mertz will take the majority of the snaps next year. Lagway, maybe even some packages and stuff like that. And then you would assume, if everything goes according to plan, he would take over the reins the year following.
Yeah, Mertz one sprained ankle away, though, and I got a thought on
100%, you're right.
Because I asked DJ Lagway about his relationship with Graham Mertz.
The whole point is just, that's a lot to put on someone's shoulders, DJ Lagway's age. But to your point, in talking to him, you come away that if someone his age could handle it, it would be him.
Yeah, he's very impressive. He's very good with the media. Again, and I think that matters. Does it matter as much as his 6'2", 225-pound frame and the fact that he was MaxPreps.com Player of the Year? No, what he does on the field matters more. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. But you can tell a lot about a kid in talking to them in the process leading up from their high school years to their college years. And I'll tell you, to me, you're not going to find a more impressive young man than DJ Lagway in that regard. He was the MaxPreps.com Player of the Year nationally. He is considered to be, I think 24/7 has him as the number 2 ranked quarterback in America, the number 4 ranked prospect in America. The bottom line, Florida signed a quarterback as highly rated as they have in over a decade. I think you got to go back to, is it Jeff Driscoll or John Brantley was the last one that they signed?
I think it's Driscoll.
Is it Driscoll? Yeah. And Driscoll was well over a decade ago. So this is rare air for Florida, at least as of late. And that made Wednesday for me, the fact that they kept DJ Lagway. The fact that they also kept LJ McCrae, that was the one I was curious about. There were a lot of stories about what happened with LJ McCrae on Wednesday. There was a thought that he wasn't going to sign, and then ultimately he did, like later on that day. Did NIL play a factor there? There's a lot of rumors as to what happened. But at the end of the day, Billy Napier signed 2 players ranked in the top 10 in America, the second-ranked quarterback and the second-ranked defensive lineman. After that, there are some concerns, which we'll get to in a moment. But McCrae, I thought, was a huge, huge get as well.
It was, and I think most Gator fans, if you're being honest with yourself, if you're someone that does track recruiting and is constantly refreshing your phone throughout signing day, there was a point where I think most people, if they had a gun to their head and had to say yes or no, will LJ McCrae sign with Florida, probably would have said no. That they didn't feel good about it. When that report that came out that he's going to delay his signing, you've been in this game longer than me. That's not usually a good sign.
And you know what that is a sign of? Another team coming in that morning and
exactly
maybe upping an offer, and
that's a sign
it becomes negotiations.
It's a sign
point
of the phone ringing.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. And,
not that I know anything,
but. Am I wrong in saying that if someone delays their signing, that's usually not a good sign for the team they're planning to sign with?
It's a very bad sign.
And when you pair that with the fact that so many other guys were jumping ship, it was starting to get to sound the alarm time with LJ McCrae, and that would have obviously hurt the class even more because it would have been one of your 2 5-stars leaving the class. To hang on to him was a really big deal. I know that the final ranking doesn't look as good as Florida fans hoped. And look, a lot of that, in my opinion, is the way that they finished up the season on the field. I mean, losing to Arkansas, not necessarily just losing to Missouri, but losing in the fashion that you did. And then obviously losing to Florida State, which most people expected you to do, but that kind of just capped off the really, really poor end of the season, not making the bowl game, all that. The momentum for the Florida program when the college football season ended was so low. And the national narrative, regardless of how true it actually is, the national narrative is that Billy Napier has one of the hottest seats in the country, if not the hottest. That hurt the class, man. It did.
No, I mean, I talked to 3 guys that all signed with Florida. All 3, not DJ Lagway, 3 guys additional to DJ Lagway. All 3 of them told me guys were recruiting. I'm telling them Billy Napier is going to be fired next year. That's the dirty part of recruiting. I mean, that's what it is. You have other schools coming in saying Billy Napier is going to be fired. And if I were that school, I would do that too, because Florida has a track record of firing coaches. That's why I've been very particular with Gator fans saying, and it's not Gator fans that get coaches fired necessarily. They start the process, and then the big money boosters continue the process. And when you recycle coaches, 6 of which in the last 20 years, you have a reputation of firing coaches, and kids don't want to commit to a coach and sign with a coach that is up and fired in a year or 2. That's why if you fire Billy Napier, you start this entire process over again. I want to get to something that's making a lot of rounds on social media, too, in a moment. Again, thank you to Southeast Orthopedic Specialist for the highest quality care. You can rely on Southeast Orthopedic Specialist for any orthopedic injury or concern. You can log on to their website by going to se-ortho.com, and you can listen for Southeast Orthopedic Specialist, the good Dr. Kevin Murphy, on Thursday mornings in the 7 o'clock hour with Jeff and Dan right here on 1010XL for his weekly analysis of injuries in sports. Also, thank you to the good folks at George Moore Chevrolet. If you're looking for an automobile this holiday season or for the new year, go check out George Moore Chevrolet. They've been around forever. Why have they been around forever? Because they do a terrific job. And George Moore Chevrolet, we appreciate their support here of the Gator Bytes podcast.
If you're driving around listening right now to Gator Bytes, which you should be, if you're not, what are you doing? And your car's messing up, you're having those issues, it's old, just go to George Moore, get a new car, man. It's not that hard.
Yeah, no, absolutely. They do a great job over there. All right, Miles Graham signs with Florida out of Gainesville, Buchholz. 4-star kid, top 100, one of the best linebackers in America.
Gee, I wonder what we're going to talk about.
All is good with the world. Until, and let me pull up the exact tweet here. So Ernest Graham, Gator great, unfortunately probably most known for getting his knee twisted by Darnell Dockett in 2001, but nevertheless a great Florida Gator player despite that situation, which was not his fault. The father of Miles Graham tweets this out yesterday, and it's gotten quite a lot of response. This is from Ernest Graham on Twitter/X. My son was raised to understand the business as it exists, but there has been new levels of disconnect with this program that I have never, and never is in all caps, ever experienced. No calls, no communication, and the driest experience imaginable. I'm just going to start is in all caps, there. Gators are getting crushed over that tweet. It's amazing what a tweet can do. Now, the way I read that, and again, everybody's reading into it. We haven't gotten a lot more clarity at the time you and I are recording this from Ernest Graham. The way I read that is they knew Miles Graham was a legacy, that his dad played at Florida. They knew Miles Graham literally moved to Gainesville to play his senior year at Gainesville Buchholz to be close to the program. They probably did not communicate with him every day like they were doing with L.J. McCrae and, DJ Lagway and the other guys, because they probably knew they had a pretty certain thing in Miles Graham. And because maybe they didn't pay Graham the attention that Ernest believed his son was due, Ernest is very upset about it. Again, I don't know that. I'm just reading into the tweet. What did you read into it?
I read into it that he's mad about the Jay Bateman situation.
Okay, and Jay Bateman just left to go take the job at Texas A&M.
Yeah, because Miles Graham plays linebacker. You have to imagine that Jay Bateman was one of the main people in his recruiting.
For the record, that happens all over the country.
Oh, 100%.
All over the country.
Right. Correct. And just like most things we've said in this podcast that burned Florida on signing day, they were good, they were bad, whatever, like Florida was not the first program for these things to happen to, won't be the last.
Yeah.
But in my opinion, I believe that Ernest Graham's tweet was in response to Jay Bateman leaving Florida to go to Texas A&M. But from everything I read, and I'm not saying I have all the answers here, but from the little that I have seen on Jay Bateman, it kind of seems like Jay Bateman left the majority of the program in the dark on this, and it was kind of a almost backdoor deal with A&M, and there was a deal, and he didn't like it, and he said no, and then they came back and countered with a better deal, and he said yes.
Well, if that's true, you got to give Bateman credit to an extent, because he could have left Tuesday.
Right, exactly.
He could have left Tuesday, and then the Gators might have been scrambling. Again, a dirty part of recruiting, but assistant coaches after signing day will leave. And for Bateman to announce he's leaving on Thursday is not cool, and I didn't really think about that. That's a good point. I think I read into the driest experience imaginable in the part that Ernest Graham, and that's why I think maybe the whole legacy thing, moving to Gainesville, maybe they didn't pay as much attention to Miles as they needed to. Your take on the Jay Bateman's an interesting one, and you're probably right. Yeah,
and then also to kind of cover your point of the conversation, I kind of thought about that too. And look, man, like, I think this was sort of a result of Miles Graham and Ernest Graham, in a way, kind of getting punished for being rock solid. Because I guarantee you, if Miles Graham had started, taking visits to other schools and talking about Auburn or talking about Ole Miss or talking about, Alabama or talking about, these other schools and having real smoke about potentially flipping, I guarantee you their phones would have been ringing more with Billy Napier's number on it. And with, at the time, Jay Bateman's number on it, and probably Mike Peterson's number on it, and Brandon Spikes. And I guarantee you that the people influential in linebacker recruiting at Florida would have been hot on his number more had he been less rock solid. But to your point, I mean, look, there's only so many hours of the day.
Well, they did go in home with Miles Graham last week.
They did. But
the entire staff was in home with Miles Graham, so I don't know how much more Ernest wants.
But would you be shocked if there wasn't a whole lot of communication before that?
But again, obviously Ernest Graham's upset. To go to social media, to not call Billy or call Mike P., who he knows, obviously, or call any of the guys over there, to go to social media and just throw this out there. I mean, Fox News picked it up and retweeted it. I mean, it's everywhere now about the University of Florida. As a Gator great like Ernest Graham, is that the best way to handle this situation? He's probably an upset father, and I get that. But you throw something out there like that on social media, and now it takes off, and it's going all sorts of places. I don't know if he handled it the best way he could have.
Right. But he did it.
He did it.
So.
He did it. And now it's out there, and Florida's getting beat over the head because of it pretty good.
Whether he handled it well or not, the reality is that for whatever reason, the program that he is a legend of and his son just committed to pissed him off in some way.
And the crazy thing is Napier's going to have, next time Napier has a press conference, he's going to be asked about this.
100%. I mean, I'll give Napier some credit on this. Kind of similar to what you were saying earlier about how if a program has a flip close to signing day, they'll tell them to wait, to hold off, to generate momentum. And Billy Napier is good at that type of stuff. He has a good thumb on the pulse of that type of thing. Not necessarily with signing day on Wednesday for the Gators, but in terms of, you think about back in the summer when the quarterback that I forgot his name that flipped to Ole Miss, the young guy. The quarterback flipped to Ole Miss, and it was like a big deal. He's like class of 25, and he was going to like enroll early or something like that. I forgot his name, but people will know who I'm talking about. But he flipped, and it was like, oh, they lost their 2025 QB, and then that same day, Florida had like 4 commitments get announced. And that type of thing has happened in the past. Billy Napier has a good thumb on the pulse of that. So the reason I point that out is with Napier's press conference, he had Lagway sign before his press conference. I think he had LJ sign before his, or at least the buzz that he was going to sign before his press conference.
Because LJ, that was about 5:45.
He had the Wisconsin transfer.
Yep.
Announced that you think that Wisconsin transfer hasn't known for at least a week he's going to Florida?
Oh, sure he has.
Of course he has. And Billy Napier knew this, by the way. It's just like you were saying earlier in the podcast. Billy Napier knew this, and Billy Napier knew he had a press conference where he was going to have to answer some tough questions. So, hey, right before I got to go do that, why don't we drop some more positive news real quick? Napier is good at that. I never felt like Mullen had a good pulse on that, so I do appreciate that part of Napier. And then for the Ernest Graham tweet to come out after the press conference, you have to imagine Billy will strategize a little bit to have some more good news before he's got to talk to the media again. This guy's really good at having to avoid really, really bad press conferences.
No, he is. That's a good point. Today's Gator Bytes podcast brought to you by Southeast Orthopedic Specialist. They're Northeast Florida's leading orthopedic center, providing an unparalleled level of care across numerous locations in both Jacksonville and St. Augustine. That includes Riverside, Northside, the South Side, the beaches, Fleming Island, and St. John's. We certainly thank Southeast Orthopedic Specialist. And again, the folks at George Moore Chevrolet. If you need a car, go to George Moore Chevrolet. That's the place to go to. They've been around forever. They do a great job not only with the buying and selling of cars, but also if you're oil changes, tire issues, maintenance, whatever you need, George Moore has it over there at George Moore Chevrolet. All right. as we wrap, Lagway and McCrae, the two biggest. The transfer portal starting to come in. They got 4 guys. The wide receiver, Dyke from Wisconsin, did not have a great 2023. His best year in college was with Graham Mertz.
Correct.
In 2022. So that's something to take notice of. Slackman from Penn was well wanted, the D lineman. I think he was the Ivy League Player of the Year.
That was a huge get.
Florida got him over North Carolina and Michigan. Auburn and A&M came in as well, so Slackman was in high demand. The tackle from San Diego State can play both right and left tackle, so we'll see what happens there. And the corner from Oregon, Bridges, he's a big corner. He's like 6'3", and there's some talk about moving him to safety. Did you see the video he did with his granddad?
Yes, I did.
It was awesome.
Yep.
His granddad was a big Gator fan, and so I think it's Bridges. What Bridges did is he basically told his granddad on video that he was going to Washington, and his granddad was all sorts of, mad, upset, almost like in tears. He's like, nah, forget it. Let's go to Florida. And then his granddad just went nuts. It was very, very cool. So only 4 guys so far. They're going to add to that, but I think it's certainly better in the transfer portal now than what they were a week ago.
And by the way, all 4 guys, and, when you get a guy in the portal, you assume this already, but I think we can confidently say all 4 of these guys that they've picked up are guys that are going to help them on the football field this coming football season in 2024. That is what matters. Because, look, I know a lot of the signing class left and the number dipped. I get all that. And there were plenty of guys that stayed. I get that too. The reality is a good majority of the recruits, with the exception of maybe a couple, like last year Eugene Wilson was one of these guys that could get on the field. A lot of them are not going to see the field a whole lot in 2024. Well, what's negative recruiting pitch against Billy Napier right now? If you sign with him, he ain't going to be your coach. Mm-hmm. The way Billy Napier bridges that gap is with the transfer portal. He has to do what Mike Norvell did 2 years ago, when Mike Norvell probably had the hottest seat in the country, and he had to have a better season and win games on the field. In comes Johnny Wilson. In comes, at the time, Micah Pittman. In comes Jared Verse. All of a sudden, they have all these transfer guys that help them win games.
Can we play Wake Forest next year?
I get it.
And
I know.
Duke and NC State.
I get it.
That schedule next year is bad for Florida.
All the more reason to go get as many guys as humanly possible that can help you on the football field in 2024.
Yeah.
I'm telling you right now, Billy Napier, this transfer portal class is, in my opinion, probably this transfer portal class and then DJ Lagway are the 2 most important acquisitions he has had in his time at Florida. He needs to continue to build on that portal class, and he needs to wind up with, it needs to be mid-October in 2024, and we're sitting here on Gator Bytes saying, man, those 5 transfer guys they got are all contributing. They're all playing a lot, making plays. Or those 6 guys or 7 guys, or as many dudes as possible that can be on the field next year helping you win games is what's going to determine if Billy Napier survives as Florida coach. Because I think you and I both understand, and I agree with you about having to keep him and the reputation Florida's built. But I think if we're being honest with ourselves, if it's a disaster by the time the cocktail party happens next year, I mean, you're not going to like his chances to finish the season out as Florida's head coach. No, and certainly not to stick as Florida's head coach through the following season.
Yeah, there's a track record. Florida gets rid of coaches. They've had 6 in 20 years. That's ridiculous. Next year's schedule, in case you did not see it, I'm assuming most of you have, they start with Miami August 31st, then they have Samford, then Texas A&M, at Mississippi State, bye week, UCF, at Tennessee, Kentucky, bye week, and then this is their November, ladies and gentlemen. Georgia, at Texas, LSU, Ole Miss, at Florida State. There is not a tougher schedule in the country.
And they won't be, if all those games were played today, they would not be picked to win any of them.
They'd be picked to win Samford.
Well, I'm saying the back half.
Well, no, I mean, you look at the schedule. Are they going to be the favorite against Miami? It's at home, but I don't know. Why would you pick Florida to beat Miami?
I bet at home They might be minus like 1.5, but basically a pick 'em.
Are they going to be the favorite to beat Texas A&M?
Where's that game?
In Gainesville. Right, but you have to think about all these.
Yeah, you do. No, they're coin flip games. You're right. I think both the Miami and Texas A&M games will be either way very small lines.
I mean, at Mississippi State, they might be the favorite against UCF in Gainesville, although UCF's a better program right now. At Tennessee, Kentucky, Georgia, at Texas, LSU, Ole Miss, at Florida State. I mean, it is the toughest schedule probably in the history of Florida football.
Yeah, I would think so.
It is crazy.
It's got an argument for the toughest schedule in the history of college football.
But, obviously it's one game at a time, and we're going to have 8 months to talk about this. He needs to beat Cristobal. And you know what? Cristobal needs to beat him. That is a gigantic season opener for Miami and Florida because both fan bases are feeling a little bit underwhelmed at their guy and heading into year 3. Cristobal is going to know that. Napier is going to know that. That might as well be a playoff game.
I'm looking at your screen right now. It's a week 0 game, August 31.
Yeah.
So it'll be, it'll probably be a standalone game.
Oh, no. August 31 is week 1 in college football. That's Labor Day weekend.
It is? Oh,
yeah,
sorry.
it's Labor Day weekend.
I have my dates mixed up then.
Because you got Georgia Clemson on the same day. It's a great day of college football.
Okay. All right. So, well, you think Miami will probably be a night game, right? You would assume.
I mean, I would assume. But again,
time hasn't been announced yet. But
but there are a lot of really good games that weekend.
Yeah.
But I would assume that's not going to be SEC Network at noon. I would think that might be one. ABC. I don't know how that works. Georgia Clemson's at a neutral site. It'd be nice for ABC to kick off their SEC coverage with Miami and Florida, right?
Yeah.
Because Florida's the home team. I could definitely see something like that happening. But obviously, we got 8 months to talk about that.
Can we? I know we want to wrap soon. I want to bring up one, and we won't spend a ton of time on it, even though I'm sure we both could. I want to visit real quick just the narrative of Florida firing coaches too quickly, because I don't disagree with you, and it is a bad track record. And again, if Billy Napier has a really poor 2024, then he's going to be the next victim. I have a little bit of an issue with it, though, just from the perspective of if the narrative is that Florida fires coaches too quickly and the leash is too short, then that has to mean that one of the coaches since Urban Meyer, Will Muschamp, Jim McElwain, or Dan Mullen, you have to believe that one of them was fired too quickly. And I don't know that any 3 were fired too quickly.
I think you would absolutely make the argument Mullen was fired too quickly.
Okay.
The guy had 3 10-win seasons.
I would say, and I would say if I had to pick one, it would be Mullen.
You could also make the argument for Muschamp. You could make the argument for Muschamp because his second year, they were 11-2 and in the Sugar Bowl. And then obviously they had back-to-back, I think, 7 or 8 win seasons, and he was gone not even before the end of year 4. So 2 calendar years less than being in the Sugar Bowl, he was gone from Florida. So, McElwain, obviously, although McElwain won 2 Eastern Division titles in his, 3 or 4 years
but
there.
But those were Fugazi titles.
I bet you would take it, whatever Fugazi means. I bet you would take a Fugazi Eastern title right now, would you not?
Of course I would.
Yeah, see?
Of course, I loved it at the time. But the point is, Georgia wasn't Georgia yet, and Florida was kind of winning the East by default.
And look, and then if you want to talk about them firing coaches too quickly, then maybe this is an AD conversation. Obviously, Strickland didn't hire all these guys, but I don't care if you hire Bert, Ernie, Kermit the Frog, Miss Piggy, and Oscar the Grouch. If you are firing coaches,
that'd be a hell of a staff.
It would be a great staff. If you have 6 coaches in 20 years, and we did my Wolfson High School math on that, over the last 2 decades, your head football coach is averaging less than 3.5 years on the job. To me, that is a problem because every time you fire a coach, you have to start over. You lose everybody in the recruiting world. You lose all that money. You got to hire completely new staff. You got to build those recruiting ties with everybody in the state. I mean, I don't know this. I'd have to look at the other SEC schools. How many SEC schools have had 6 coaches in the last 2 decades?
Yeah.
I can't imagine there's many more than Florida.
I'm trying to think of other schools that have.
Well, I can tell you ones that haven't. Auburn, Georgia, the ones that are good haven't,
Auburn's gone through some coaches.
I mean, I'm Alabama. Alabama and Georgia. Yeah, Auburn's probably close, although Auburn, heck, you have to go back to That was Tuberville there 20 years ago? I mean, oh, yeah, you have to go back a ways.
Although Malzahn was there for a long
while.
time, but since Malzahn, they've been cycling through a decent bit.
Yeah, that's because Harsin, I thought they fired Harsin too quick, although it looks like Hugh Freeze is doing a good job. But the point is, 3.5 year average, a 3.5 year average for coaches to me is just simply not long enough.
I agree. Overall, I do agree. I'm just saying, and this entire narrative is true. But like, I agree with this. My thing is, I just think you have to look a little bit deeper into it and kind of look at each coach individually, where they were at, where they were fired, what the direction of the program was at the time. And my whole thing is, I don't think it was like asinine that each coach got fired at the time. It wasn't like all of college football was like, what the hell is Florida doing getting rid of this guy? Now, again, I think Dan Mullen presents the strongest case for that. Because outside of 2021, every season under Dan Mullen was pretty damn good on the field. I know that 2020 ended poorly because all the guys were gone in the Cotton Bowl and he had some weird comments after the game. I get all that, but that's not cause to fire a guy. And then 2021, things fell apart. But, I mean, if you ask the majority of Gator fans and even probably Gator media, they will willingly admit to you that Dan Mullen needed to go at the time that he did. So, again, you are absolutely right that the rate of coaches and the shortness of tenure is a problem. And it is a thing that I think other programs have taken note of and negatively recruited against Florida on. I 100% agree with all of that.
By the way, Auburn, 5 coaches in the last. And that's because they fired Harsin after 2 years. So they're at 5, Florida's at 6.
And my question just becomes after that, is the problem that Florida gives their coaches too short of a leash? Or is the problem that they just keep simply striking out with their coaching hires?
No.
Do they need to take a different approach? Because outside, I think Mullen was not necessarily this way. Because Mullen had ties to the program, had been a strong SEC coach at Mississippi State. I think they've kind of, like Billy Napier, Group of 5 school, elevating him. Jim McElwain, Group of 5 school, elevating him. Had previous ties to the SEC, whatever. Will Muschamp, Texas, a little bit of a different thing. But, like, is that the issue? Just that they're not hiring the right guys?
Well, something's the issue. That part of it, fan base having no patience, fan base thinking they're better than they are. Florida right now is a below-average SEC football program.
That's correct.
That is reality. Whether you want to accept that or not, whether you get angry when you hear that or not, the reality is, if you take a straw poll of now these 16 SEC teams, if you want to add Texas and Oklahoma, we got to go quick here. If you want to just take a schoolyard pick 'em, how many of the 15 other SEC football programs right now on December 22nd, 2023, are you taking over Florida? You're going to take Alabama. You're going to take Georgia. You're going to take Texas. You're going to take Oklahoma. You're going to take LSU. You going to take Tennessee?
It's hard for me to take Tennessee because Florida beat them on the field this year.
You going to take Kentucky? Kentucky's beat them 3 years in a row.
I'll take Kentucky.
You going to take A&M?
The game's got to matter. When I watch the games and I see a program destroy them, it matters.
Missouri? Missouri's better than Florida right now.
A&M, I don't know. I think A&M's got about as many problems as Florida does right now. I know they got new energy with Mike Elko and everything, but that program's had some issues.
Missouri?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Absolutely.
So right there, there's 7. Without even thinking about it, there's 7. We haven't even mentioned Auburn. I think Auburn and Florida are very... Ole Miss?
100% Ole Miss. Not even a debate.
So now that's 8. That's half. Now you are in the bottom half. I just said that's the bottom half of the SEC. So Florida needs to work on that. They need to get back up into the top half because right now they are simply not there. I got to go. The wife's going to kill me. That is Graham Marsh. I'm the hacker, Ryan Green. Hey, happy holidays, man.
Yes, sir. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Happy New Year. Absolutely. That is Graham Marsh. I'm the hacker, Ryan Green. Thank you for watching and listening to Gator Bytes, 1010XL.com and the Florida Gator 1010XL Facebook page.